Welcome back, guys, to Battleground Stories. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. Thank you. People ask me why I joined the Scout Rangers. The truth is quite simple. I joined because my brother Miguel was a ranger as a child in Manila. When you see your brother come home in his uniform with the blue shoulder patch, you want to follow in his footsteps. My name is Corporal Rico Santos, Philippine Army 1st Scout Ranger Battalion, 3rd Company. I've been on duty for 8 years. I've encountered Abu Sayyaf fighters, MILF rebels, and NPA guerrillas in places most Filipinos have never even heard of. The remote villages of Sulu, the mountain strongholds scattered across the southern islands, the forest corridors of Mindanao where the trees are so dense that sunlight becomes a distant memory. I've been shot at, shelled, ambushed, and survived countless deadly dangers. But nothing prepared me for what happened in October 2003 in a godforsaken stretch of jungle outside Tipo Tipo in Basilan Province. It was the height of the rainy season. Our platoon was hunting a suspected Abu Sayyaf cell that had been terrorizing local villages. Intelligence reports suggested they were using the dense jungle as a staging ground for kidnapping operations targeting foreign workers and wealthy Filipino families. Our mission: locate, engage, neutralize. 12 of us left Camp Navarro that morning. Our platoon leader was First Lieutenant Antonio Cruz from Cebu, top of his class at the Philippine Military Academy, tough, smart, calm under fire. The kind of officer who made you believe you could walk through hell and come out the other side. His second was Staff Sergeant Eduardo Eddie Reyes, a veteran ranger from Davao. Eddie had been doing this since the late 90s, and he had this eerie ability to sense danger before it arrived. He'd saved our lives more times than I could count just by trusting his gut. The rest of us, Corporal Jose Fernandez, our radio man, always carrying that heavy PRC-77 on his back, and never complaining about the weight. Private First Class Ramon Diaz, our medic, quiet but competent, the kind of guy who could patch you up under fire without breaking a sweat. Private First Class Carlos Mendoza, 19 years old, our youngest. He'd only been with the Rangers for 6 months, but he had the heart of a lion. Then there was Corporal Luis Aquino, Corporal Mario Ramos, Private First Class Dante Cruz, Private First Class Paulo Garcia, Private First Class Miguel Torres, and Private First Class Rodrigo Bautista. Good men, brothers in every way that mattered. We moved out at 0600 hours, just as the sun was beginning to burn off the morning mist. The jungle was alive, birds calling from the canopy above, insects buzzing in clouds around our faces, the distant rush of water from streams swollen by recent rains. The air was thick and humid, heavy enough to make breathing feel like work. Each step squelched in the muddy trail. We moved in tactical column, maintaining proper spacing, weapons ready, eyes constantly scanning the shadows that seemed to move and shift in the filtered light. Lieutenant Cruz took point with Eddie right behind him, reading the jungle like a book only he could understand. Standard operating procedure. We'd done this hundreds of times before. The terrain was challenging. Steep hills that tested our endurance, dense undergrowth that grabbed at our boots and uniforms, trails made treacherous by the constant rain that turned everything into slick mud. But we were Rangers. This was what we trained for. This was what we lived for. For the first 2 hours, it was just another patrol. Hot, humid, exhausting, but routine. We followed a trail that intelligence had marked as a possible insurgent route, moving slowly, carefully, always alert for signs of recent activity. Eddie stopped us periodically to check for tracks, broken branches, disturbed vegetation, anything that might indicate someone had passed through recently. He'd crouch down, touch the mud, smell the air like some kind of jungle predator himself. That's what made Eddie the best tracker in the regiment. Around 900 hours, Eddie found footprints. Multiple sets, fresh, maybe 2 to 3 hours old. He called Lieutenant Cruz forward, and the rest of us took up security positions, weapons trained outward, forming a protective perimeter while our leaders assessed the situation. I was close enough to hear their conversation, watching Eddie point out details in the mud that I would have completely missed. 6, maybe 7 individuals, Eddie said quietly. Look at the depth. They're carrying heavy loads. Could be weapons, could be supplies. See this pattern here? Military-style boots on at least 3 of them. These aren't farmers. Armed insurgents, then, Lieutenant Cruz said, studying the tracks carefully. Direction? Northeast, deeper into the valley. They're not trying to hide their trail, which means either they're confident or careless. The lieutenant considered this for a moment, his jaw set. We follow, but stay sharp. They could have sentries posted, and if they're this bold, they might be expecting company. We continued on, now following the trail left by our quarry. The jungle seemed to grow denser with each step, the canopy above blocking out more and more sunlight until we were moving through a perpetual twilight. Vines hung like curtains, and the undergrowth became so thick in places that we had to hack our way through with machetes. The sounds changed, too. The birds grew quieter, their calls becoming sporadic and nervous. The insects seemed to buzz with a different frequency, almost anxious. I'd been in the jungle enough times to know that something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. It was just a feeling, a prickling at the back of my neck that made me check my 6 more often than usual. Around 1100 hours, we stopped for a brief rest and water break. The heat was oppressive, and even though we were in the shade, sweat poured down our faces. Carlos sat down next to me, taking long pulls from his canteen. You feel that? He asked quietly. Feel what? I don't know. Like we're being watched. I looked at him. His face was serious, eyes darting to the jungle around us. It's just the jungle getting to you. First time this deep in Basilan? Yeah, he admitted. It's different than training. Heavier somehow. That's because it's real, I said. Out here, everything wants to kill you. The terrain, the heat, the insurgents. You just have to stay focused. Rico, he said, his voice even quieter. My grandmother, before I left for the army, she told me to be careful in the jungles. She said there are things out here that are older than the war, older than the Spanish, older than anything. She made me promise to carry this. He pulled out a small religious medal from under his uniform. She said it would protect me. From what? He didn't answer right away. From things that hunt in the dark. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell him it was just superstition, but something in his eyes stopped me, and truth be told, I had my own grandmother's medal tucked in my pocket, though I'd never admit it to the other rangers. 5 minutes, Lieutenant Cruz called out softly. Check your gear. We're moving again. We continued deeper into the valley following those tracks. By now, we'd been on patrol for over 5 hours, and the combination of heat, humidity, and tension was wearing on everyone. But we were professionals. We pushed through. That's when Eddie raised his fist. We froze instantly, dropping to one knee, weapons up, safeties clicking off in near-perfect unison. He turned to Lieutenant Cruz, his face troubled in a way I'd rarely seen. Sir, something's wrong. What is it? Listen, we did. And that's when I realized what Eddie meant. The jungle had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, no rustling of small animals in the undergrowth, nothing. Just an oppressive, unnatural quiet that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and my skin break out in goosebumps despite the heat. In all my years of jungle operations, I'd learned that silence like this meant predator or humans nearby. But this felt different. Not the absence of sound, the presence of something that had driven all sound away. It was as if the jungle itself was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Could be an ambush, Eddie whispered, his knuckles white on his rifle grip. They might have spotted us. Lieutenant Cruz scanned the surrounding jungle, his M16 moving with his gaze, finger resting just outside the trigger guard. Recommendations? We should... Eddie never finished that sentence, because that's when we heard it. A sound unlike anything before. It started low, almost below the threshold of hearing, a deep thrumming through the ground itself that I felt in my chest before I actually heard it. Then it rose, becoming a high, keening wail that set every nerve on fire. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else entirely. Something primal and ancient that didn't belong in the natural world. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through the trees until I couldn't tell which direction it originated from. 5 seconds that felt like eternity. When it stopped, the silence was even worse, pressing down on us like a physical weight. "What the hell was that?" Carlos whispered, voice shaking. His face had gone pale, and I noticed his hands were trembling slightly on his rifle. No one answered, because none of us had an answer. Lieutenant Cruz made a quick decision. We're pulling back. Whatever that was, we're not equipped to handle it until we know what we're dealing with. Jose, radio base. Jose tried his radio, adjusting the frequency, checking the antenna. Only static. "Sir, I'm getting nothing. Something's jamming the frequency." "Atmospheric conditions?" the lieutenant asked, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Negative, sir. Signal strength should be fine here. This is something else. It's like something's actively blocking the transmission." Ramon, our medic, spoke up. "Sir, I don't feel well." He'd gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite us standing still. "Like something's watching us. Like we shouldn't be here." I felt it too. We all did. That overwhelming sense of wrongness, of being somewhere we absolutely should not be. "We're moving. Back the way we came," Lieutenant Cruz ordered. "Mario, rear security." We began retreating. The jungle felt hostile now, shadows deeper, undergrowth tangled, air thick with menace. 200 meters later, Eddie froze, staring ahead. There in the mud were tracks. Fresh tracks. But not human. Approximately foot-sized, but proportions wrong. Toes too long, heel too narrow. Claw marks in the mud. "I've tracked everything in these jungles," Eddie said slowly. "But this... never seen anything like this." "Could be a deformity?" Lieutenant Cruz asked. Eddie shook his head. "Sir, look at the stride length. Whatever this was moved fast, really fast, and it cleared this log in a single bound. That's 1.5 meters. No human could do that at this speed." "This walked on 2 legs, not 4, Eddie added. We kept moving, faster now, spacing breaking down as fear crept in. 1/2 kilometer later, Rodrigo cried out. 3 long scratches ran from shoulder to elbow, deep enough to bleed. His uniform torn by claws. "Something grabbed me," Rodrigo stammered. From the side, a shadow moved, felt like hands, then this. Ramon treated the wound, hands shaking. "We're being hunted," Eddie said quietly. "Then we fight back," Lieutenant Cruz said. "Formation, weapons outward. Whatever this is, we face it together." We formed a defensive circle, backs together, rifles outward. Light was fading, shadows growing longer. Minutes passed. Then we saw movement in the undergrowth, 30 meters out. Something large, moving parallel to us, stalking. "Hold fire," Lieutenant Cruz commanded. "No clear target." The movement stopped. Everything went still. Then something stepped into view. I've tried describing what we saw to others. Words always fail. The creature was roughly humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, torso, head. But that's where resemblance to humanity ended. 7 feet tall with impossibly long limbs bending at wrong angles. Skin dark, almost black, with a wet, glistening quality. The fingers, God, the fingers, were elongated, tipped with curved claws. But the face horrified me most. Eyes too large, too round, reflecting light with yellow-green luminescence. The mouth was impossibly wide, and when it opened slightly, rows of needle-sharp teeth. We stared at each other across 30 meters. Carlos whimpered behind me. Every instinct screamed to run. Then Eddie whispered, "Aswang." The creature's head snapped toward Eddie, tilting at an unnatural angle like a bird examining prey. Then it smiled. Not human. Something that twisted its features into nightmare. "Fire!" Lieutenant Cruz shouted. 12 M16 on full automatic. Hundreds of rounds into that killing zone. The sound deafening. Bark exploded from trees, undergrowth shredded, air filled with cordite. But the creature moved. Impossible speed darting sideways, using trees as cover, body flowing around obstacles. We tracked it with fire, trying to lead, trying to anticipate. Like shooting smoke. Then it vanished. Gone as if never there. "Cease fire!" Lieutenant Cruz ordered. We stood there, weapons trained on emptiness, chest heaving, hearts pounding. Did anyone hit it? No one answered. "We need to move," Eddie said urgently. "Now. That thing knows where we are. We wasted ammunition. We need a defensible position before dark. There's a ridge about a kilometer west. Rocky outcropping," Lieutenant Cruz decided. "Move out. Double time." We ran. All pretense of tactics abandoned. We ran like our lives depended on it. Behind us came that sound again, that keening wail. But this time, triumphant. The sun was setting. We stumbled over roots, pushed through undergrowth, slid down muddy slopes. After 20 minutes, we burst onto the rocky outcropping. High ground, clear sight lines, little vegetation. "Perimeter. 360 defense. Jose, get that radio working." We spread out among rocks, weapons trained at the tree line. The jungle below was almost dark now. Jose worked frantically, finally got a signal. Faint, crackling. "Camp Navarro, this is Sierra 2-3. Do you copy?" Static, then barely audible. "Sierra, read. Weak. What? Situation?" Lieutenant Cruz took the handset. "Camp Navarro. We have encountered hostile force of unknown origin. Grid reference Victor Sierra, 473289. Need immediate air support and extraction." More static. "Sierra 2-3. Cannot authorize until identify hostile." "They're not coming," Eddie said flatly. "They think we're losing it. They want confirmation before risking birds and men." Lieutenant Cruz slammed the handset down. "Then we hold until dawn. They'll send patrol at first light. 12 hours. Against something that moved faster than we could aim, seemed immune to bullets, hunted with intelligence. That wailing cry came from the jungle below. Closer now. Then another cry answered from the opposite side. Then another. Then another. We weren't being hunted by one creature. At least 4 surrounded us. Maybe more. Carlos started praying quietly, fingers moving over rosary beads. "It's gonna be a long night," Eddie said softly. He had no idea how right he was. The first hour of darkness was the worst, not because of attacks. Nothing happened, but the waiting, the anticipation, knowing something inhuman circled our position, and that was almost worse than combat. In combat, at least you're moving, reacting, doing something. This was just sitting in the dark, straining your eyes and ears for any sign of movement. Every nerve in your body screaming that something terrible was about to happen. We'd set up defensive positions in pairs around the outcropping. I was with Luis covering northeast. Eddie and Mario had north, Lieutenant Cruz and Dante northwest, and so on around our small perimeter. We'd pooled ammunition, 400 rounds between 12 of us. In a sustained firefight against human enemies that might last 10, maybe 15 minutes at best. Against these things, we had no idea. "How many magazines left?" Luis whispered. 3. "You?" "Same, plus half a mag in the rifle." He paused, checking his vest pouches again, as if hoping more ammunition might magically appear. "Rico, what are we dealing with?" I didn't answer right away. How could I? I'd seen the creature with my own eyes, but my brain still refused to accept what it had witnessed. It was easier to tell myself it had been a trick of the light, exhaustion playing tricks on us, stress-induced hallucination. Anything but the truth. Eddie called it an Aswang, I finally said, the word feeling strange on my tongue. Luis went still. My grandmother told stories about those. I thought they were fairy tales. Stories to keep kids from wandering into the jungle at night. Yeah, me too. A branch snapped in the darkness below. Both Luis and I brought rifles up immediately, safeties off, fingers hovering over triggers. My heart hammered in my chest, so loud I was sure Luis could hear it. "Hold fire," Lieutenant Cruz called softly from his position. "Could be an animal." "Don't waste ammunition." We waited, hearts pounding, eyes straining to see into the darkness. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Nothing else happened, but the sense of being watched, of being hunted, never went away. "This is psychological warfare," Eddie said from his position, his voice low but carrying in the quiet night. "They're trying to wear us down, make us jumpy, get us to waste ammunition on shadows." "They?" Ramon asked nervously. "How many do you think there are?" "At least 4 from the calls we heard earlier. Could be more. Could be a lot more." "In my village," Carlos spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. "The old people say that Aswang hunt in packs sometimes. They say that if you see one, there are always more nearby. They say." He trailed off. "What else do they say?" I asked, suddenly wanting to know everything, every piece of folklore, every old wives' tale. If these things were real, then maybe those old stories held the key to surviving them. Carlos was quiet for a moment. "They say Aswang are afraid of holy objects, garlic, salt, daggers made of special metals. But most of all, they say Aswang fear fire." "Fire," Eddie repeated thoughtfully. "That's interesting." "Carlos, that's not helping right now," Lieutenant Cruz said, but there was less conviction in his voice than before. "Everyone, maintain discipline. Stay focused on your sectors." Another hour passed. The moon rose, providing just enough light to see vague shapes below, trees swaying in the breeze, creating an endless parade of shadows that could have been anything or nothing. My eyes started playing tricks on me, seeing movement where there was none, phantom shapes that disappeared when I looked directly at them. I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, the creatures had moved on. Maybe our defensive position had convinced them we were too difficult to target. Maybe they'd decided to look for easier prey elsewhere. Maybe the attack came without warning. One moment, Miguel was sitting at his position on the western perimeter, scanning his sector. The next moment, something had his ankle and was dragging him toward the edge. He didn't even have time to scream, just a sharp gasp of surprise and terror as he was yanked backward across the rocks, his rifle clattering away from his grasp. "Contact west!" Paolo shouted, and suddenly the night exploded with muzzle flashes. I spun toward the commotion, trying to get a clear shot, but Miguel and the creature were a tangle of confusion in the darkness. Paolo lunged forward and grabbed Miguel's arms, trying to pull him back. For a moment, it was literal tug of war, with Miguel as the rope, his face contorted in pain and fear. Then the creature released him suddenly and both tumbled backward. The creature didn't retreat. Instead, it flowed up over the edge of the outcropping with spider-like movement, long limbs carrying it across stone with terrifying speed. It moved wrong, the joints bending at angles that shouldn't be possible, the fingers gripping the rock with those terrible claws. Every rifle on the western side opened up. In the strobing muzzle flashes, I saw it clearly for the second time, and it was even worse than I remembered. That wet, writhing skin glistening in the firelight. Those luminescent eyes that never blinked, even as bullets tore into it. Rounds impacted its torso, its arms, even its head. Black fluid, not blood, something darker and thicker, splattered from the wounds, hissing where it hit the rocks. But it didn't fall. It staggered, each impact forcing it back slightly, but it didn't fall. It opened that impossibly wide mouth and screamed. The sound was so loud, so piercing, that several of us instinctively clapped hands over ears, dropping weapons. Sound that bypassed ears and vibrated in your skull, causing physical pain that felt like ice picks being driven into your brain. Then, still screaming, it retreated, moved backward with that fluid, unnatural motion, and dropped over the edge. By the time we recovered enough to aim weapons again, it was gone. "Miguel, you okay?" Lieutenant Cruz called. "My ankle," Miguel gasped, his voice tight with pain. "It crushed my ankle." Ramon scrambled over with his flashlight. In its beam, we could see Miguel's boot was destroyed, leather torn like paper by those claws. Ankle underneath swelling rapidly, turning dark purple and black, clearly broken in multiple places, possibly shattered. "Can you walk?" Miguel tried to stand, supported by Paulo and Ramon. The moment he put weight on it, he collapsed with a cry of agony. "Negative, sir. I can't even feel my toes." This was bad, very bad. We were in a defensive position, yes, but we couldn't stay here forever. When dawn came, if we survived until dawn, we'd need to move to a landing zone for extraction. And now we'd have to carry Miguel every step of the way. "Splint it," Lieutenant Cruz ordered Ramon. "Make it as stable as you can. Give him morphine if you need to." While Ramon worked, we maintained watch. But that brief attack had shattered any illusion of safety. These things could reach us here. They could climb vertical rock faces with ease. They could attack from literally any angle. We weren't safe. We'd never been safe. "Ammunition check," Eddie said quietly, his voice grim. "Everyone, report." The answers came back, and they weren't good. That firefight had cost us at least 100 rounds, maybe more. We were down to maybe 300 total. That was barely 25 rounds per person, against an enemy that seemed to laugh at bullets. "Make every shot count," Lieutenant Cruz said, his voice hard. "Semi-auto only. Aim shots. No clear target. Don't shoot. We need to make this ammunition last until dawn." "Sir," Jose spoke up, "I think I know why they attacked Miguel." He was on the edge, most isolated position. They were testing response time, seeing how fast we could concentrate fire. Now, they know. Eddie nodded. "That was a probing attack. They're learning our capabilities." "We adapt," Lieutenant Cruz said. "Everyone pull in tighter. Reduce perimeter. I'd rather have overlapping fields of fire." We repositioned, moving closer together. It felt safer, but meant less warning time. Everything was a trade-off. The next attack came an hour later. From the south, 2 of them simultaneously. They came up over rocks, moving in that fluid way. But we were ready. Concentrated fire from 6 rifles tore into them. They didn't fall, but didn't press the attack. After taking 20 rounds combined, they withdrew. "Still testing us," Eddie said grimly. "Each attack, they learn more." "Then we stop being predictable," Lieutenant Cruz replied. "Next time, half hold fire initially, let them commit, then hit them from unexpected angle." But we never got the chance, because the third attack didn't come from the edges. It came from above. I don't know how long it had been clinging to the rock face above us. One second we were watching below. Next second something dropped directly into the center of our position. It landed on Dante, bearing him down. Long clawed fingers wrapped around his throat. Dante's scream cut off instantly. We froze. Our perimeter was set for attacks from outside, not within. Eddie moved. He pulled his combat knife and lunged, driving the blade deep into the creature's back. The creature shrieked and released Dante, spinning to face Eddie with impossible speed. Its clawed hand lashed out, catching Eddie across the chest. Body armor saved his life, but the force sent him flying into rocks. Mario and I fired simultaneously, center mass. The creature staggered, dark fluid spraying, but it didn't fall. Lieutenant Cruz threw a grenade. "Down!" he roared. We dropped. The explosion was deafening, flash temporarily blinding. When I looked up, the creature was gone. Where it stood was now a smoking crater. "Dante!" Ramon was already moving. Dante was alive, barely. The claws had torn through his throat, missing the artery by millimeters but doing terrible damage. A blood pooled beneath him. Ramon worked frantically, but even I could see it was bad. Dante's breathing was raspy, labored, each breath accompanied by wet, gurgling sound. "I need to get him to a hospital," Ramon said urgently. "He needs surgery. I can't do more here." Lieutenant Cruz checked his watch. 0200 hours. 4 more hours until dawn. "He doesn't have 4 hours," Ramon said flatly. The lieutenant tried the radio again, only static. "How's Eddie?" Mario was checking him. "Bruised ribs, maybe cracked. He'll live but hurting." Eddie pulled himself up, wincing. "I'm fine. Just give me a minute." "We can't stay here," Lieutenant Cruz decided. "They know our position. They're adapting. We have 2 wounded. We have to move." "Move where?" Luis asked. "It's the middle of the night. That jungle is their territory. There's a village about 3 kilometers east, Santa Cruz. Small place, but they'll have a medical clinic. And maybe their radio works. 3 kilometers through hostile territory with 2 wounded," Eddie said, voice strained. "Bold plan, sir. You have a better one." Eddie didn't. None of us did. "We move in 10 minutes. Mario, Paolo, you help Miguel. Luis, Rodrigo, you've got Dante. Be careful. That neck wound is serious. Rest of us maintain security." As we prepared, Carlos approached me, face pale, eyes wide with fear, but hands steady. "Rico," he said quietly, "if something happens, if one gets me, don't talk like that. No, listen. If one gets me, don't try to save me. Just run. Get everyone else out. Promise me." I wanted to argue, to tell him Rangers don't leave men behind. But I'd seen what these creatures could do. "I promise," I lied. "Everyone ready?" Lieutenant Cruz checked his watch. 0215. "We need to reach Santa Cruz by 0400. Stay tight, stay quiet, stay alert, move out." We formed up around our wounded and began descent. Behind us, from multiple points, came those keening wails. They knew we were moving. They were following. The jungle at night is a different world. Darkness isn't just absence of light. It's a presence, thick and suffocating. Every sound amplified. Every shadow could be death. We moved as quickly as we dared, carrying Miguel and Dante. Half a kilometer in, we heard something large moving through undergrowth, paralleling our path, not hiding, just following. "Keep moving," Lieutenant Cruz ordered. "Don't stop, don't look back." But hard not to look. Every instinct screamed to turn, to face the threat. Another kilometer. Dante's breathing getting worse, shallower. Ramon kept stopping to adjust bandages, keep pressure on wound. We were losing him. "How much farther?" Eddie asked, voice tight with pain from ribs. "Maybe 1.5 kilometers, Lieutenant Cruz replied. That's when they stopped following and started attacking. First came from our right flank. Mario saw it first, got off 3-round burst that caught its center mass. The creature stumbled, but retreated. "Contact right," Mario called. "Keep moving," Lieutenant Cruz ordered. A second from the left, third from behind. They weren't trying to kill us, trying to separate us, panic us into breaking formation. And it was working. Carlos, walking next to me, suddenly wasn't there. I spun around. He was 10 meters back, on the ground, creature on top of him, so fast I hadn't seen it happen. "Carlos." I started running back. "No." Lieutenant Cruz grabbed my arm. We keep moving. But, gunshot. Then another. Carlos had gotten his pistol out, firing up into the creature's face point blank. The creature recoiled, shrieking. Carlos scrambled backward. That's when I saw it. Not just one creature. 3. They'd coordinated their attack, waiting to separate a target, and now they had him. Carlos got off one more shot before they were on him. His scream cut off abruptly. Then they were dragging him into jungle, moving impossibly fast. Carlos! I tried to run after him, but Eddie grabbed me, holding me back despite his pain. He's gone, Eddie said quietly. He's gone, Rico. We can't help him. Move, Lieutenant Cruz ordered, voice hard. Everyone, move now! We ran, abandoning tactics. Just ran, carrying wounded, weapons out, expecting claws in our backs any moment. But no further attacks came. Maybe they had what they wanted. We burst out of jungle into a clearing. Ahead, 300 meters away, lights. The village. Santa Cruz. Almost there, Lieutenant Cruz gasped. Keep moving. Behind us, deep in the jungle, we heard Carlos scream. Once, then silence. We ran toward those lights, toward civilization, toward safety, or at least the illusion of it, because the night wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Santa Cruz looked like every small Filipino village in Basilan. Bamboo houses on stilts, clustered around a church with tin roof reflecting the moonlight. A few solar-powered streetlights cast weak yellow pools of illumination onto the muddy paths between buildings. Normally at this hour, around 400, everyone would be asleep. But tonight, lights burned in several windows. The villagers had heard our gunfire echoing through the jungle. They knew something was happening out there in the darkness, something bad. We stumbled into the village like refugees from hell, which in a way we were. 11 men now, down from 12. We'd lost Carlos out there in the darkness, dragged away by those things, his final screams still echoing in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. We were carrying Miguel and Dante, both in critical condition. Eddie could barely breathe from his cracked ribs, wincing with every step, and the rest of us were exhausted, terrified, running on pure adrenaline and the desperate animal need to survive, just a few more hours until dawn. An old man emerged from one of the houses with a shotgun in his weathered hands, maybe 70 years old with deeply lined face and gray hair, but his eyes were sharp and alert, the eyes of someone who'd seen trouble before and survived it. "Who are you?" he called out in Tagalog, the shotgun not quite pointed at us, but ready. "Philippine Army Scout Rangers," Lieutenant Cruz replied, also in Tagalog, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "We have wounded men. We need help. Please." The old man's eyes widened as he took in our condition, the blood soaking through our uniforms, the torn fabric where claws had ripped through, the expressions on our faces that told of horrors witnessed. "What happened to you out there?" "We were attacked in the jungle." "By who? Abu Sayyaf? NPA?" Lieutenant Cruz hesitated. "How do you explain to someone that you were attacked by creatures from folklore, that monsters are real?" "Something else," he finally said. "Please, we need medical supplies, and we need to use your radio. I'm Captain Flores, barangay captain here. Come, bring your wounded to the clinic." He turned and called out to the houses. "Everyone wake up. We have soldiers who need help. Maria, Rosa, bring water and bandages." Doors opened throughout the village, and people began emerging. Men in worn shirts and pants, women in house dresses, even a few children rubbing sleep from their eyes, all looking at us with a mixture of concern and curiosity and growing fear. They'd heard the gunfire, seen the muzzle flashes lighting up the jungle in the distance like lightning. They knew. They led us to a small building near the church, the village clinic. It was basic, just a concrete box with barred windows and a corrugated tin roof, but it had beds, medical supplies, and most importantly, bright electric lights powered by a small generator that chugged away outside, providing the first real illumination we'd had in hours. Ramon immediately went to work on Dante, using the clinic's supplies, which were better than what he had in his field kit, but still woefully inadequate for the severity of Dante's injuries. Rosa, the village health worker, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and steady hands, helped him. But even with the better supplies, I could see from their expressions that Dante's condition was critical. The throat wound was still bleeding, and his breathing was getting shallower with each passing minute. Miguel's ankle was splinted and wrapped more professionally than Ramon had been able to manage in the field. Rosa gave him some pain medicine from the clinic's limited stock. He'd live, but he wouldn't be walking anytime soon, possibly never without a severe limp, though none of us said that out loud. Lieutenant Cruz found the village radio, an old but functional unit that Captain Flores used to communicate with the municipal center in emergencies. The lieutenant tried raising Camp Navarro, adjusting frequencies, checking connections, tried calling for extraction, but the interference was worse here than it had been on the outcropping. All he could get was a wall of static that hissed and crackled like frying meat. "The radio hasn't worked properly for 3 days," Captain Flores explained, his face troubled. "We thought it was just atmospheric conditions from the storms, but now I'm not so sure. Now I think something was blocking it." "But what?" Eddie asked, sitting carefully on one of the clinic beds while Rosa wrapped his ribs with practiced efficiency. The old captain hesitated, glancing at his people gathered in the small clinic. "Strange things have been happening. Animals acting unusual, dogs barking at nothing in the middle of the night, refusing to go near the jungle, chickens refusing to roost, staying awake and agitated, carabao breaking through fences trying to get away from something. And 3 nights ago, we heard sounds in the jungle, terrible sounds, and like nothing we've heard before, and I've lived in this village my entire life." A woman standing near the door spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "My mother saw something 2 nights ago. She was up late, couldn't sleep because of the heat, looked out the window. She said she saw something moving through the village, something that walked on 2 legs but wasn't human. It was looking in windows like it was searching for something. She's old," another villager said quickly, nervously. "Her eyes aren't good." "It was probably just a large animal, maybe a dog." "She knows what she saw," the woman insisted, her voice rising with frustration and fear, "and she's not the only one. My son saw something in the trees yesterday morning, something watching him from the branches, something with eyes that glowed." Lieutenant Cruz and Eddie exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Captain Flores," the lieutenant said carefully, choosing his words, "do the people here believe in Aswang?" The reaction was immediate and visceral. Several villagers made the sign of the cross, fingers moving rapidly in the old ritual. Others touched religious medals around their necks or pulled out rosaries from pockets. One old woman in the corner began praying softly in a dialect I didn't recognize. Captain Flores's expression grew grim, decades of modern skepticism apparently fighting with something deeper, older, primal. "You've seen them," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of terrible fact. "We've seen something," Lieutenant Cruz admitted. "Something that killed one of my men and wounded 2 others. Something that doesn't die when you shoot it." The old captain sat down heavily on one of the wooden benches, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years, and then some. "My grandfather told me stories when I was a boy. During the Japanese occupation, Japanese soldiers would go into that jungle on patrol and never come out. The Japanese blamed the Filipino guerrillas. The guerrillas blamed the Japanese. But the old people, the really old ones who remembered the time before the Spanish, they knew the truth. There are things in that jungle that have been there longer than any of us. Things that were here before the Spanish came with their crosses and their guns, before the Muslims sailed from the west, before even the first Filipinos arrived on these islands from across the sea. Old things, hungry things, things that hunt." Can you defend us? Captain Flores asked, looking at Lieutenant Cruz with eyes that had seen too much and hoped for too little. If those things come here to the village, can you protect my people? Lieutenant Cruz didn't answer right away. How could he? We had maybe 200 rounds of ammunition left between 11 men, 2 of them critically wounded and unable to fight. We had 2 grenades, against creatures that seemed nearly immune to bullets, that could climb walls like spiders, that moved faster than we could track, that attacked from any angle with terrifying intelligence and coordination. We'll do our best, the lieutenant finally said, and I could hear the weight of that promise crushing down on his voice. But I won't lie to you, Captain. Whatever those things are, they're dangerous, very dangerous. They've been hunting us through the jungle all night, and they won't stop until they have what they want. Then we prepare, Captain Flores said, standing up with new determination burning in his old eyes. Everyone, go to your homes quickly. Bring any weapons you have. Guns, bolos, knives, farming tools, anything that can cut or kill. Gather in the church. It's the sturdiest building we have, and it's blessed ground. It was built by my grandfather's grandfather. If there's any place in this village those things might fear, it's there. As villagers dispersed to follow his orders, Rosa approached us quietly. Her face was grave, the face of someone about to deliver news she didn't want to give. The wounded man with the throat injury. He's bleeding internally. I've done what I can, but he needs a real hospital with real doctors and real equipment. Hours, maybe less, or he'll bleed out. Dante, hearing this despite his weakened state, tried to speak. His voice was barely a whisper, damaged by the terrible throat wound. Leave me. Not happening, Lieutenant Cruz said firmly, his voice hard with the kind of determination that made men follow him into hell. Ramon, stabilize him as best you can. We're getting everyone out of here alive. We helped the villagers move into the church, about 40 people in total, mostly women, children, and the elderly. The younger men, maybe 10 of them, had weapons. A few old rifles that looked like they dated back to World War II, several shotguns, bolos with worn wooden handles, even some homemade spears fashioned from bamboo and kitchen knives. The church itself was sturdy construction, thick wooden walls that had weathered decades of typhoons, only a few small windows set high up near the roof, and solid wooden doors reinforced with heavy bolts that looked like they could withstand a battering ram. If we had to make a last stand, this was as good a place as any, maybe the only place. We positioned our men at the windows and doors. Luis and Mario took the front entrance, the main point of attack. Paolo and Rodrigo covered the back door. Jose set up his radio equipment near the altar, still frantically trying to punch through the interference. Eddie, despite his injuries and the pain I could see written on his face, positioned himself at one of the side windows. And I was at the other side window with Lieutenant Cruz, both of us scanning the darkness outside. Miguel and Dante were laid out on wooden pews near the altar, with Ramon and Rosa watching over them, checking vitals, adjusting bandages, doing everything they could with what little they had. Then we waited. The village went quiet. Too quiet. Even the normal jungle sounds had stopped. No insects chirping, no night birds calling, no rustling of small animals in the undergrowth. Just an oppressive silence that seemed to press down on the church like a physical weight trying to crush us. "They're coming," Eddie said softly from his window, his voice certain. "How do you know?" one of the villagers asked, clutching his bolo with white knuckles. "Because I've been hunting in jungles my entire life," Eddie replied. "I know what it sounds like when predators are moving into position. And these are the apex predators." As if to confirm his words, we heard it, that keening wail rising from the jungle surrounding the village, cutting through the silence like a knife. Then another wail answered it from a different direction. Then another. Then another. They were all around us, forming a noose that was slowly tightening. That keening wail rose from the jungle. Then another. Then another. all around us. At least 6, Eddie said. I saw movement in shadows between houses. Something large. 2 legs. Multiple contacts, Paolo called. They're surrounding us. The creatures moved closer. Then one stepped into light 30 meters away. Those luminescent eyes stared at me. Slowly, it opened its mouth wide, displaying needle-sharp teeth. They're studying us, Eddie said. Another appeared, climbing a house, perching on the roof like a gargoyle. Then Jose shouted, I've got signal. Camp Navarro, this is Sierra 2-3, do you copy? Static, then, Sierra 2-3, read weak. Camp Navarro, Santa Cruz Village, need immediate extraction, 2 critical casualties, under attack. Sierra 2-3, copy. Helicopter, ETA, 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Roger, we can hold. Hostile forces unlike any encountered. Approach with caution. The creatures attacked. They came from all sides. 2 hit the front door with tremendous force. Luis and Mario fired through the gap. Another came through east window. Eddie shot it 3 times before it retreated. A 4th crashed into my window. I fired point blank, saw dark fluid spray, but it reached through with long fingers. Lieutenant Cruz threw his last grenade. It bounced off the creature's chest, then detonated. The explosion blew it backward. Even with half its torso torn open, it crawled before going still. One down! The front door cracked, bolts giving. Luis and Mario fired constantly, running low on ammunition. Fall back to the altar. We retreated. Soldiers formed semicircle around altar, every weapon trained on doors. The door gave way. 2 creatures poured through. We fired everything. Deafening noise, muzzle flashes. The creatures staggered, dark fluid spraying, but they didn't fall. They kept coming. We're out of ammunition, Luis shouted. I fired my last 3 rounds. Empty. We were done. Captain Flores stepped forward with gasoline can and lit torch. Get back. He threw gasoline at nearest creature and tossed torch. The creature went up like bonfire, shrieked and stumbled backward. Flames spread. It fell, writhing, burning, then went still. Fire worked. The second creature hesitated. Eddie grabbed a torch and thrust it at its face. It recoiled and retreated. They're afraid of fire. Light whatever you can. Within minutes, we had a dozen torches blazing. Form up. We're taking fight to them. We charged out, torches blazing. The creatures retreated before flames. We pressed advantage, pushing them back toward jungle. One creature didn't retreat fast enough. 4 villagers surrounded it with torches. It went up in flames, died shrieking. The remaining creatures fled into jungle. Then we heard it. Helicopter rotors. That's our ride. The Huey came in fast, circled once, then landed. Miguel and Dante loaded first, then we climbed in. As helicopter lifted off, I looked down. Captain Flores and his people stood in circle, torches burning. But Carlos hadn't survived. The flight took 20 minutes. Dante rushed into surgery. He survived but never spoke properly again. Miguel medically discharged. Ankle never healed. Eddie transferred to training after his ribs healed. The official report called it encounter with unknown hostile forces, possibly insurgent cell, using psychological warfare. No mention of creatures. But Lieutenant Cruz, Eddie, and I, we know what we saw. We know what hunted us that night. I've been out of the Rangers for 5 years. I work security for a bank in Manila, but I keep a torch next to my bed because I learned something that October night. The old stories, the folklore. Sometimes they're true. Sometimes the monsters are real, and fire keeps them at bay. Captain Flores passed away years later. At his funeral, the village turned out. They said he was a hero. He was. Carlos's body was never recovered. We searched. Found nothing except spent casings and a dark stain on jungle floor. His name is on the memorial wall at Camp Navarro. Private First Class Carlos Mendoza. Killed in action, October 2003. Circumstances listed as combat operations. Not the whole truth. But maybe the truth is too terrible for a memorial wall. Every October, I visit the memorial. I bring flowers. I say a prayer. And I remember a 19-year-old kid who faced nightmare and never broke, never ran. He was a ranger. And rangers never quit, even when they're fighting monsters.